circle of life, eternal life, your eternal soul. Now, for the past few weeks, we have talked some about some of the challenges around the election. So I thought I would lighten it up a little this week and talk about death. Many of us grew up in, or some of us grew up in faith traditions that taught us that eternal hell and damnation is what we were in for unless we lived by some particular rules that were made up by that particular faith. But Ernest Holmes looked at the truths that run through all of the major religions, and he didn't find hell and damnation. And Sandy, you can take that slide down now if you want to. He didn't find hell and damnation, but he found hopefulness. He found that we are one, that we are whole, and that we are eternal beings. Those are truths that run through all of the great religions. In our Declaration of Principles, what we believe, Ernest Holmes said, we believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. And I love what Paulo Coelho wrote in the book The Alchemist. We are travelers on a cosmic journey, stardust swirling and dancing in the eddies and whirlpools of eternity. Life is eternal. We have stopped for a moment to encounter each other, to meet, to love, to share. This is a precious moment. It is a little parenthesis in eternity. So where did we come from? What is this thing we call death? And what does the fact that our souls are eternal have to do with our life now? Because if we can't use it, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. So, where did we come from? We came from life. We came from the divine's desire to express. That thing we call God has to express. It expresses as life. It expresses as life as each of us. And there's, of course, way more to life, the circle of life, than we can imagine. And there's way more to each of us as individuals than we usually think about. Now, change happens. Change is the only thing that we know we can always count on in this physical life. And yet there is something larger, this thing we call spirit, that encompasses it all. We are within it. And because we are one with it, we are eternal. God never started. God's never going to end. I can't even imagine never. I can't even imagine eternity. I don't know about you, but this is like, I have to confess, a little beyond what I can imagine, this eternity thing. Ernest Holmes wrote, "The soul is the one triumphant, indestructible, and unconquerable thing you possess. Shot from the invisible into this experience, it constitutes your great reality. But why wait for physical death to enjoy and experience your immortal being? Do not prepare to die, prepare to live, whether you are 10 years old or 100. There's no death. It's impossible for you to die." So what is this thing called death? Well, here's the thing. Most of us really don't have a clue where our souls were before we came into this life. Now, some people are pretty sure they know, and that's great, but most of us really don't know for sure, and most of us really don't know for sure what's going to happen after we leave this physical life. But we know that there's more to life than these somewhat fragile physical bodies that have been called our mobile homes or our magic suits that we get to live in for a time. There is within each of us a soul, a life that is living us. We're far more than we could ever be if we were just these physical beings. Because we love, we care, we help, we connect and protect, we feel and enjoy things like music, and we create art, and we do things like cooking and gardening and all of those things that we love that involve much more of us than just this physical stuff. And there's this amazing intelligence within all of us. And this is an intelligence that doesn't quit, even when we are near death. I believe even after death, it doesn't quit. I had the honor to be present at a dear friend's death in 2003. Her name was Arminta, but she liked to be called Skip. And she was just an amazing woman. She was the assistant artistic director at the Museum of Natural History in Denver until she retired in the 70s. And if any of you have been to the Indian Hall in the Museum of Nature and Science, then you have seen her work, because she was responsible for designing that and was in fact one of the first people in the museum world to actually consult Native Americans on what was to be put into this Indian Hall. This was, I believe, in the 60s, and folks in the museum world just weren't even paying attention to what the Indians thought should be in there. So she was kind of on the cutting edge. Now, she also loved music, and she loved supporting music. And in fact, she was one of the people who helped support the music school where this center used to meet as it began. I can remember years ago, coming up here for events because she wanted to support that. And one of the things that she did to support music was that she commissioned musical pieces to be done by choirs and orchestras. And one of the pieces that she commissioned was called Ouroboros. And Ouroboros was a grand piece of music that portrayed the stages of women's lives from birth to death. There were, the premiere of it was done with a choir of 100 voices, an orchestra of 50, and 6 soloists that ranged in age from 6 to almost 80. And they sang pieces for each of the stages of a woman's life. And of course, things like the maiden, the mother, the crone. And the last and the oldest of the soloists who sang the crone, the wise old woman, was my dear friend Skip. And so she did this amazing thing, and of course it was recorded. And several years later, as Skip was entering hospice, we were talking about what music she would like to have played as she neared her end of life on earth, as she neared her death. And Ouroboros was one of the things that she said. She said, "Oh, I would love to hear that." So fast forward to the day of Skip's death, the morning of Skip's death. I was there with Skip and Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Bulls, and the 3 of us were there, and Skip was unconscious at that point. And I remembered, we were listening to music that Skip had chosen, and yet I remembered that I had left the Ouroboros CD in my car. So I went out, got it, came back in, put it on the CD player, and we listened to this amazing piece of music. Now, about 45 minutes into that CD, Skip's solo came on. And when that solo came on, the energy in the room changed. There was an aliveness. I didn't actually see light, but I could feel the aliveness. And even though Skip was definitely seemed to be unconscious, as her solo came to its end, she took her last breath. Now, I believe that was an intelligence that was in her being. I believe that she chose that time, that intelligence enabled her to do that. And I actually think that, that she did it as a reminder and an affirmation for us that she was just fine. She was off on a new adventure, because this was a woman who loved adventures. For her 82nd birthday, she bought herself a new travel trailer that she could pull behind her truck. You know, that's the way she lived. She continued teaching, drawing into her 80s. She was filled with life, always up for adventure. And I think she was reminding us that she was off on a new adventure. And that was amazing. So along with Ernest Holmes, I believe in the eternality. I believe in the immortality. I believe in the continuity. I believe Skip went on to paint some beautiful, beautiful sunrises. Now, death is a part of life that some of us avoid thinking about. I mean, in our culture, in our society, there is an aversion to death. In our medical industry, there is an aversion to death. They'll do everything to keep you technically alive sometimes, and that doesn't always serve the highest quality of life. Concerning the change from life to death, this is what Ernest Holmes wrote. Nature will not let us stay in any one place too long. She will let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul. This is a wise provision, for should we stay too long here, we would become too set, too rigid, too inflexible. Nature demands the change in order that we may advance. And when the change comes, we should welcome it with a smile on the lips and a song in the heart. So what about life after death? One of the greatest questions of all times is there life after death? Now, ancient philosophers were divided on this question, but every major culture in history has had some notion of life continuing after physical death. Even well-known atheists such as Carl Sagan believed that the absence of evidence about life after death isn't the evidence of absence. Or what that means is just because we can't prove that there's life after death doesn't mean that there isn't. So here's a little tale called Life After Birth, and it's by one of my favorite authors, Unknown. There were two babies, twins, still in the womb, getting near birth. The first one asks, "Do you believe in life after birth?" His sister replies, "Of course. After birth comes life. Perhaps we're just here to prepare for what is to come next." "Forget it," he says. "After birth there is nothing. For from there no one has ever returned. And besides, what would it look like?" "I don't know exactly, but I feel like there are lights everywhere. Perhaps we will walk on these feet of ours and eat with our mouth. Maybe we will even have other senses that we cannot even imagine now." This is utterly ridiculous, he says. Walking isn't possible. And why would we eat with our mouth? Can't you see the umbilical cord? And for that matter, think about it for a second. Life is impossible because the umbilical cord is too short. She says, yes, but I think there's definitely something. It's just different from what we call life now. He says, don't be stupid. Birth is the end of life, and that's it. She says, look, I don't know exactly what will happen, but the mother will. The mother? You believe in the mother? Well, nobody has ever seen the mother. We don't even know what she looks like. How can you believe in the mother? No, I've never seen her, but it feels like she's all around us. It feels like we are within her. And certainly, I think it's thanks to her that we exist. Well, leave me alone with this craziness, all right? I'll believe in the mother when I see her. The sister says, you can't see her now, but if you're quiet, you can feel her love. If you're quiet, you can feel her caress. You can feel her loving hands. And soon after, the twins were born, and their adventures began. So what is the fact that we are eternal beings? What does that fact have to do with the lives that we are living now? What does it have to do with the way we will spend the coming week, the way we will spend this afternoon? There are people who, on their deathbed, say things like, I wanted to come back to church, but I felt so bad because I didn't know what I was thinking that made me get this cancer that's going to take my life. I mean, there are people even within our own teaching that think that somehow an illness or death is a spiritual failure. And that is not the case. And what could be sadder than folks not having that support of their spiritual community at a time like that? Because, let's face it, folks, none of us is going to get out of this life alive, you know? We are human. We're divine, certainly, but we are also human. We have come to live in these human bodies. We have come to be in relationship with each other. We have come to live fully, not only as eternal beings, but as physical beings. I think our eternal souls have chosen to come into this bodily experience, to be physical, to do things, to have experiences that it could not have without this flesh and blood stuff. And so I think that's where our invitation is. Because our souls are eternal, but our bodies are not. They're a gift that we have now. They won't last forever. So it behooves us to take advantage of this gift of our physicality while we are here now. Now, we can do that by using our senses. I loved the way your prayer started, talking about seeing the sunshine and feeling the wind. Because that is our invitation to live fully, to use our gift of sight, to see colors and faces, to see beauty and art, to use our sense of hearing, to hear children playing, to hear the things that delight us, to hear the voices of the ones we love, to hear music, to hear the birds, to hear laughter. And then, of course, we've got taste and smell. Potluck food. For starters, you know. all the things that we get to taste, all of the fragrances, the flowers, the crunchy leaves that we still have a few of around at this time of year that smells so good. And then, yes, there's our amazing sense of touch. Being able to touch each other. Being able to touch our kids, our grandkids, our beloveds, our pets. Being able to feel that love. There are so many gifts that we have in these physical bodies. Now, there will be lots of other times that we can talk about, what do we think does happen after our physical life is over? We can talk about reincarnation. We can talk about heaven and hell. We can talk about all of those other things. But for now, my invitation to you is to allow your eternal spirit to blossom and grow using your physical body, your senses. This thing that we have come here, our magic suit, that we have come here to play in for a while, appreciating it while it's here. We're here to be fully alive. Now, I imagine most of you have heard this quote. Life is not a journey to the grave with intentions of arriving safely in a pretty well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." That, my dear ones, is what we are here for. Your eternal soul is amazing. And we are eternal because we are one with the divine. There's only one life. That life is God's life. It's living in, through, and as us. It is forever seeking greater expression in, through, and as us. Our souls are eternal and safe. Our physical bodies are here for us to experience the divine. We are here to live life fully. Let's do that. What do you say? Yeah. An affirmation is going to come up on the screen, and I invite you to say it with me. I am the embodiment of the living God. I am immortal and eternal. I live life to the fullest in joy and gratitude. And so it is. Join with me in prayer as practitioners stand in high consciousness. We are in the midst of this thing that I call God, that is absolutely unlimited, that contains all beauty, all joy, all gratitude, that contains all of the experiences of our senses, all of the experiences of our souls, and so much more. Just as there are universes and galaxies without number, there is so much more waiting for us, and so much more for us here right now. For each of us is one with that Godness, with that allness, free to choose what part of it we will express, what part of it we will embody, what part of it we will enjoy. And so what I know for each of us going forward is that we are alive, awake, and aware. We use our senses. We sense God all around us, in the faces that we see, in the breezes that we feel, in the foods that we eat, in all that is surrounding us, all that we have the opportunity to experience. And so I claim that Spirit fills each of our paths and pops up with delightful surprises for each of us to remind us that we are not only eternal, but we are here to live life to the fullest. Now, I am grateful, because I know that Spirit shows up for us each in our own unique ways that we cannot miss. And that as we go forward, it is in joy, it is in gratitude. And I simply let this go into the law, letting God do what it does so well, which is produce, that which has been called forth. So knowing that it is done, I invite you to say with me, and so